Welcome to a new knitting episode from me. My name is Helle, or Hella, and I live in Denmark. And I'm so pleased to be sitting down with you, as it were, to record another knitting video. On the program today, I have 2 finished objects and I have 2 WIPs, one of which is new, and some acquisitions to go with that. I don't actually often show acquisitions, maybe because my stash is already too enormous. But I've made myself one rule that I was allowed to buy new yarn if I cast on immediately, and I did. So there's that. Then there's a little quote, and if I remember a little something at the end, that's just something from my life, or rather my daughter's life. Stay tuned if you wish. If not, there will be chapters down below, so you can, or in this description box, so you can skip back and forth if you wish. And also, I always forget to say that, but I presume most people know that the things I talk about in terms of yarn and patterns will be linked in the description box below. So that out of the way. Just wanted also to say that I'm very pleased to be recording today because it's a proper spring day here in Denmark. I have to say spring has really gotten underway here. Already the cherry blossoms behind me are beginning, actually just today, because there's a bit of a breeze, they're beginning to shed their leaves. You know, it looks like it's snowing, these pink petals, and I'm like, oh no, not yet. But we've been able to look at them for a while now, and it's just lovely. I love this time of year. I have to say that they blossomed way earlier than back when I first planted them. Everything is blossoming and budding sooner, about 2 to 3 weeks sooner than what it was like when we first made this garden about 17 years ago. So that's a little sort of kind of scary, but there it is. Thank you so much for spending this little bit of time with me. I really appreciate it. And also thank you for those of you who left lovely quotes. And thanks for any little reminder that you're actually out there in a nice way, that we're connecting here, because it feels a little weird and a little lonely sometimes. So I definitely like that part of it, the fact that I feel that there's a bit of connection. Let me just share this quote. It's something that I mentioned in a yoga class recently. Oh, maybe I should also say that the name of this channel, Danish Musings, is way before I started making knitting videos. I was just making these sort of what you might call calming life videos from Denmark and from travels and from little bits and pieces of my life here. And then I just slowly got into knitting, not knitting videos, not having any idea that that was going to be where I then headed. But the Danish Musings was from back then, and that title came from a book I wrote about England a few years ago. What was it called? England Revisited, Musings of a Danish Anglophile. So I thought, yeah, I'm apparently all about the musings. So just to let you know why it's called that. So the quote for today is something that I shared in a yoga class only yesterday. It's not knitting related at all, but it's life related. And I think it was first said by some Buddhist monk or some master, or somebody like that. I don't actually have the name, and I don't have the exact wording of the quote either, but it goes something like this: the only Zen you will find on the top of a mountain is the Zen that you bring yourself. And of course, what that means or hints at is that we can't find satisfaction or calm or joy outside of ourselves if we don't have something in ourselves that we can sort of tap into to find that center, that place of calm. Because if we continually pursue something outside of us, once we get that, there's going to be a moment of joy, sure. And it's not like I don't do this. Let me just say that it's not like I don't have an ego that strives for things, but the joy and the bliss and the calm and the Zen that is more sort of continual, regardless of the circumstances, is within us. You know, so just a reminder that we can always tap into that inner sense of calm and peace, maybe just by doing some conscious breathing. There's the yoga teacher just dipping in there. I'll leave that bit aside now. If you hear something in the background, it's because somebody's cutting their hedge with a rather noisy hedge cutter. And it's because I've left the garden door open because this is hot. They've said that it's going to be about 20 degrees Celsius today. So this is already feeling pretty warm. So not only is it feeling a little too warm for right now, the temperature right now, also when I begin to feel warm, my skin tends to be a little more, the pores open, and I feel the prickle of garments more. And the other day when I finished this, hold on, let me just check this color. When I finished this and I tried it on, I was wearing rather a pretty sort of thin long sleeve t-shirt, but still apparently quite thin underneath. And I was like, probably I was a little hot because I'd just been on my bike, but it was very prickly. Now it's not so bad, but I do have a shirt underneath and I have a little tank top underneath that. So this is definitely going to be a garment for winter. And what garment is it, you ask? Well, this is the Foxthoughts Pullover by Hiroko Payne, or The Hare and the Crow. And I've used the yarns that the pattern called for. Let me just grab those. And as I've talked about this several times before, so I may forget some details, in which case I will refer you to one of the two previous videos, which would be episodes 24 and 25, I guess. I think I first mentioned this over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, because that was when I thought I was going to knit it. And I really had to sort of muster the courage to knit this because it was a bit of an undertaking, I have to say. A joy, but an undertaking. So I used the La Bien-Aimée colors that the pattern calls for. I bought a kit which was available back then, but I believe you can actually pre-order mini skeins in whatever colors you choose. I think there's a dye to order thing at La Bien-Aimée now, which is perfect. I'll just show you what it looks like, my little basket here. This is with my little sticky labels telling me what the yarn is called, because as you can tell, there's quite a lot of different colors used here. So I really had to be aware of what color to pull. And as you can also see, there's quite a few colors left, quite a few yarns left, and there's a whole skein of this color, which is the main color. Let me just show you what is at the end here. Actually, two of these two are left, and a whole skein that I haven't used at all. So yes, it's very expensive yarn. This is without question my most luxurious sweater in terms of the cost of the yarn. I bought it when there was a bit of a discount, so you may want to look out for that. And I could have done with less of some of them, or less of the undergrowth. And this one, Sea Glass, I have 2 partial skeins left, so I could have just bought one of those. By the way, can you tell that there's a slight difference in color there? Maybe you can't, but to me, this one, the one that you can see over here, is slightly darker than the other one. It doesn't matter at all, but it just sort of struck me. So a lot of really beautiful colors. That one is Sea Glass. I've mentioned it before. I really love that color. Then you've got the color Hegelia, just showing you a few of the colors. Hyacinth, purple, As If, this hot pink, one of my favorites, Fluoro Morganite, this fluorescent color. Then there are quite a few neutrals. There's French gray, this light gray. Then there's, oh, I believe, is this ash maybe? This is sandstone. There's also an extra sandstone left, so I could have bought less of that as well. There's another purple. Oh yeah, that's anemone. And Hella, this hot orange. What's this one called? I forget. No, that one's ash. I forget what the other one is called then. Stone, I think. And then there's this one, which is just beautiful. There's a whole lot of it in the sweater. I would be tempted to knit something where this one is more prominent. It's called the Isle of Arran. So a lot of truly beautiful colors in here. And the main color is Undergrowth, which is this brown. Yeah, there are little flecks of gray in there, but it's mainly dark brown. Okay, so I think I have at least one sweater quantity of these colors left, so probably at some stage I'm going to try to do something with it. Not sure what. Let me see, what can I say about this pattern? It was a joy to knit. It really was. I felt like I was really joining the sort of the major league knitters when I started this. I made a size 2, but I made some modifications, which I will try to get into as far as I remember. I did talk about how it was strange to me that the beginning of round was in the front and not in the back, but I think I managed to sew it down so that it looks pretty seamless. The pattern calls for 3.75 millimeter in the colorwork pattern. I forget what that is, and that's US 5, I think. And I went up to size 4 millimeter, and I knew that that was going to get me in trouble, if you will, because I didn't meet gauge, but then I also felt that the fabric was already pretty dense, and I've never ever sized down in a pattern. I've often sized up because I'm a relatively tight knitter, apparently. And also I didn't want the collar up here too tight, so I cast on with actually that same needle, even though you're supposed to cast on with a smaller needle. I also prefer wider collars, and as I mentioned in my last video, there's an option for 2 different collars. But the second collar doesn't start until after this first bit of colorwork, and I wanted that in there because I think it was just such a nice transition with these little arrows. First, I was like, well, this isn't taking as long as I thought. I'm going to zoom through this. And of course, that was only in the beginning. And once you started making extra increases and you hit about here, the rows take, or the rounds take a really long time. But it's also fun, you know, but it just, you know, you maybe do 2 rounds in one evening and you're like, whew, you know, and it didn't get you very far in the pattern, but it was still, you know, it was still lovely. It's not one of those projects that's meant to be worked up really fast. Because I didn't meet gauge, my yoke stops a lot further down on my body. I'll add some clips where you can see it properly. I saw that some people's yokes stop all the way up here. So I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Oh, by the way, if you hear rumbling, that's just my stomach. That's because I haven't had breakfast yet, because my house is quiet right now. There's nobody else in it, so I have to make the most of it when it's quiet. Anyway, because of that, I had to split for sleeves early. In the pattern, you're supposed to split for sleeves after the color work. Clearly, that was not going to work here. They would be major batwing sleeves. So I split for sleeves early. I tried it on so many times by the time I was here, and then I went a little further, a little further, a little further, because I didn't want it to be too high up either. You know, that would be a bummer. And I believe I split after row 21. It turned out that I was looking at the pattern going, when should I split? And suddenly I realized, reading in the pattern, that the last increase is on row 21. So unless you want to end up with fewer stitches and maybe not meeting the pattern, the chart, you have to go at least beyond the last increase. That made sense to me. I split for sleeves after that last increase, which is after row 21 on the second chart. There are 2 charts. There's the first bit of the first part of the yoke, and then the last bit. I guess the chart is just sort of split in half, split in 2. When I had to do that, I also had to do a bit of fudging to make sure that the pattern lined up. And I added a few increases for the sleeves. I added 2 extra increases than what the pattern called for. But for the body, I decreased maybe 5 stitches on each side in order to make the pattern line up. And that was actually pretty ideal because of the fact that I hadn't met gauge, my garment was already becoming a little bigger than the size 2 I was going for. I did feel that I wanted it to land somewhere between sizes 2 and 3 because I didn't want it as fitted as the pattern calls for. So if you do this, just, you know, try it on and just add or subtract stitches, whichever is relevant, in order that you have the full pattern repeats and the size that you like, or the fit that you like. As I mentioned, I think the yarn is also really good for color work, despite the fact that it's scratchy on me. It really does make for some really nice yarn to do color work in. It creates a really neat fabric, and already before I'd blocked it, it looked really neat. I did block it. I asked somebody, or asked you guys last time, if somebody had knitted it, had you actually blocked it the so-called correct way. Hold on, I'm just going to take it off because this is becoming just a little too hot. Okay, so I just had to take off the sweater. It was simply becoming too hot. So let me just maybe show you the fabric here. You can see the evenness with these colors. It creates a really nice fabric. Where was I? Oh yeah, I was talking about the blocking. I asked whether you would suggest washing and blocking it because you really don't want these colors to bleed, and as somebody suggested, you don't, for one thing, you don't want to maybe add heat to this and steam block it with an iron. Sure, that makes sense. I would never put it directly on the garment. I would always have some kind of cloth between, but I did also want to try to block it to create that sort of drape. It was still a little sort of poofy before I blocked it, and I added a little bit of clear vinegar, which I usually do if I have some color where there may be a risk of bleeding, because if you don't know, the vinegar makes the color sort of stick to the yarn and not bleed. I've tried that once or twice before, and that seemed to work. It might not have bled anyway, who knows, but I sometimes actually add it to my washing if I don't want certain garments that I wash in the washing machine to become faded. So anyway, let me show you when I hold it up like this. Let's see, what else can I say about it? I feel I've talked about it so much because I've talked about it in the previous video. I want to mention that there's a so-called sewn cuff bind off for the sleeves, which I'd never tried before. Maybe you can see it here. I'll insert a little clip perhaps where I show you how I do it. So you basically go through the first 2 stitches as if to purl, pull the thread through, make sure that the tension is in line with the stitches, with the ribbing here, and then you go through the first stitch as if to knit and let that stitch fall off the needle, or help it fall off the needle, and that's it. Extremely simple. Into 2 stitches as if to purl, back through the first stitch as if to knit, and let that stitch fall off the needle. And I watched a little video that was maybe 2 or 3 minutes long in order to create this bind off, and it was really, really simple. Just as simple as the so-called regular bind off, and way simpler than the Italian bind off because there are only 2 steps, so that made it really easy. Sometimes when I do the Italian bind off, I'm just sort of sewing along and I'm like, oh, where am I now? Have I, do I need to make another one of these before I do that? It's probably not quite as stretchy as an Italian bind off, but it's fine for these cuffs. What else can I say? Of course, it's knitted top down, it's knitted in the round. And one thing I want to say about it is that I wove in a lot of ends as I knitted it. I did what is called Weave and Steven, the one that Stephen West shows. I remember I did that many years ago when I knit it first time round, when I was in my 20s, before I had a hiatus of some 20 plus years. I did that technique as well, and that was before Weave and Steven existed. So just to let you know that that's maybe that's a good technique here, or any technique that just sort of, it made it slower often when I started a new round, a new color, but I was really grateful that I'd done it by the time I had to weave in the other ends. Let me show you what the inside looks like. This is the inside. Here you can see down here how I've woven them in as I went along. It's basically just that you twist the yarn around the strand you just used, you twist it around the next, I don't know, 6 or 7 stitches in the new yarn, and then you've woven in that end already. Yeah, if I had not done that, it would have been, a very laborious piece of finishing. There's already a few ends that I hadn't woven in like that, and I had to check all of them in order that I didn't cut a piece of yarn that hadn't been woven in. So there's a bit of finishing, I have to say. In terms of some of the stats, if you will. Mine measures 100 centimeters around, or how many inches is that? About 39 inches, which gives me about 10 centimeters or 4 inches of positive ease, which is pretty much what I was going for. Maybe it's actually going for a little more, but I had to stick with the pattern repeats under the arms. It's 54 centimeters long, mine is, or 21 inches at the back. And it comes in a variety of sizes. I mean, I don't even want to bother to write what size it comes in, because it comes in a range of sizes. And just also want to say that, as I mentioned, I did not meet gauge. My gauge was only 26 stitches per 10 centimeters or 4 inches, whereas the pattern calls for 29. So that's why it also grew a little. But as I said, I liked that because I didn't want it to be fitted like the pattern is. To me, this looks a little like, I don't know, one of the silhouette. Looks a little more like some of Junko Komodo's designs, and I like that. It's a little more sort of roomy and boxy. Let me also just mention again that I did size down to a 3.5 millimeter needle when I began the rest of the body here, using just the 2 strands of the main color. Oh yeah, it's 2 strands all the way. Did I not mention that? No, it's 2 strands all the way. And a few times you use 2 strands of the same color, but often you use 2 different strands, which is why you get this fade. And some of the colors that you use together are not so obvious, like orange and gray, for instance. And sometimes it's more like 2 different colors of purple, so that they do create like a gradient. I asked people about the difference between a fade and a gradient last time, and I think a few people wrote that a fade can be like here, where you fade from different colors into other colors, whereas a gradient is more or less the same color, that is just maybe from light to dark. That makes sense. Somebody did also say that it could be the other way around, but you know, regardless, it makes sense that one is the other. One is one and one is the other, even no matter which it is. I think it does make sense. And when I think about it, Stephen West has a shawl called Geo Gradient, and I think it's colors in the same family, isn't it? So that does make sense. I think that's that for the Foxthoughts Pullover. I feel like I climbed a mountain with this and came to the top and had an excellent view, with a lot of zen also, by the way. Yeah, definitely a long time in the making, but also very worth it. I'm looking forward to wearing it in the autumn or the winter. Not right now, probably. But yeah, can highly recommend this pattern. And if you're not too sensitive to yarns, can also definitely recommend the yarns. They're a joy to knit with. And they're so satiated. I feel the colors are so satiated and so rich. Even though I'm somebody who prefers neutral tones, I really also appreciate these sort of jewel colors that are in this pattern, in this sweater. So yeah. I forgot to mention that if you know the original pattern, you will probably have noticed that there is color work at the bottom of the sleeves. And as you can see, I decided to omit it, even though I really liked the sort of bracelet look of the color work on the cuffs. But since my yoke already went down so far, I felt it would just be a little too overdone if I included it at the bottom of the sleeves. So I decided to omit it in order to create a calmer finish and an overall sort of sense of balance. I was also wondering whether to change the design, the fit of the sleeves, and maybe make more bell-like shaped sleeves or something along those lines. But I decided to go with a simple silhouette because there was already so much going on with the color work, and I wanted that to be the star of the show, not an interesting silhouette. All right, so I've just changed clothes to show you my next finished object, which is the Lyra Blouse. And that is a pattern by Aegyo Knit, and I've used Ito yarns. And let me just show you the 2 yarns that I've used. I've used a combination of Kino, which is this silk, 100% silk, in the color Snow Gray, which is like this sort of a slightly heathery light gray. And I've paired it with their Sensai in the color Crocus. Um, the pattern is by Agunit or Caroline Skovgaard Benson, and her sample was worked up in a combination of Sensai and Rakuda, which is a merino camel blend, I believe, at least certainly a wool, whereas I opted for the silk in order to get a lighter, not only lighter, but more lightweight and cooler garment, because I mentioned in a video that I made at the beginning of the year in terms of my intentions that I wanted more indoor garments, and I certainly have this now as a very nice indoor garment, or sort of a blousey garment that is not one of those practical things that you wear outside, but you can wear to, like, you know, if you meet up with people or a coffee date, or I wore it at an Easter lunch a few weeks back. So that's very nice. I really appreciate that. I have to say that because it's got silk mohair, I can't be very hot. You know, it has to be not too hot, but it works. And I have to say also, as I mentioned last time, Sensai is a really soft silk mohair. I really appreciate it. And it comes in a lot of beautiful colors. I also really love the silk. I only just dipped into the third cone of this. So if you make it really cropped or a smaller size, you will be able to get away with using 2 cones, but probably you will use 3 cones. But you may have quite a bit left. I think, did I use 3 or 4 of the silk mohair? I think I dipped into the 4th skein of silk mohair. It was the first time I used Ito, but certainly not the last time. I really like their yarns. There's something really delicate, and I don't know. I really like their, I mean, I like the writing on the label. I mean, that's just, you know, it looks like calligraphy. This sort of very Japanese, but I think they're based in Germany, which is interesting because another yarn that I used a couple of years ago for the snow crocus was Mominoki yarn. That's also Japanese, but based in Germany. So I'm not sure what the deal is there, but really like this yarn, and I would like to try to use this again, maybe with another strand, and see how that works for maybe more of a summery garment. I'm even wondering what it would look like if you use 2 strands of the kino. Of course, the Sensai can be used for anything as a nice silk mohair. So this was a test knit for Caroline, and it was really a very simple sweater or blouse to knit, which was welcome, I have to say, after I'd been in that heavy duty color work mode. So you knit it also top down. There's a twisted rib, but only the knit stitches are twisted, and then regular pearls. You don't need to twist the pearls when you don't see the inside. Then there's a nice raglan here, which is also kind of wide and also with the twisted stitches. And then there's slightly dramatic billowy wide sleeves that are 3/4 lengths. So it's also top down, knitted in the round, and then it has this relatively wide ribbing at the bottom. Hers is a bit more cropped than mine. Mine is about 43 centimeters or 17 inches at the back from top to bottom, and hers is a bit shorter, but of course you can knit in whichever length you want. I don't usually knit many cropped garments, but for this one it worked out, and it seemed obvious. And likewise, I don't often knit sleeves that aren't long. I like them extra long, but for here it also seemed obvious, and I wanted to go with what the pattern suggested, also seeing that it was a test knit. And I think it's probably also quite practical that they're not full length when they're this billowy and wide, because then you would get your sleeve into all sorts of things if you're, I don't know, doing the dishes. As mentioned, I also really like how the 2 colors play together. So even if they're quite different in color, you get an even colored garment, I feel. The purple is toned down with the gray, and the gray gets this purple hue, and the color lands somewhere in the middle, which is like a purplish gray, and I really like that. I don't have a whole lot of purple in my wardrobe, and this is delicate and muted enough that I really enjoy it. It weighs only 167 grams, so it's a very lightweight garment to wear, and For me, it's both sort of very pretty and obvious to wear with maybe some nice slacks, you know, pleated pants, but just as obvious to wear it with jeans so that you can sort of tone down the pretty blousiness of it and make it a little more casual. I like it when a garment, you can sort of style it like that. I think that's pretty much it. Hopefully I will by now have added some clips where I show you what it looks like, where you can see the full length of it. Yeah, I think that's that. So now I'd like to show you my 2 works in progress. I also have actually 2 other works in progress. One is very much dormant, the other is semi-active, and then I have 2 very active WIPs, if that makes sense at all. Maybe you have that same sort of, you know, different categories of works in progress. I don't know. The first one you may have seen before if you've been here before. It's the Obsidian by Tanya Barley. I haven't gotten very far since I was very much intent on finishing the Foxthoughts and the Lyra, but this is what it looks like so far. This is where I'm at. This is as far as I've gotten, so not all that much further since last time, but I'm still very much really enjoying this. And the yarn is, it's just supposed to be DK weight yarn, so I'm using yarn from my stash, which, like most other people, was one of my intentions for this year, an ongoing intention, you might say. And for the main color, I'm using Pure Lana in black, jet black from Gepard Garn. And let me see, the color that I'm knitting with as the contrast color right now is also Pure Lana in this grayish dusty pink. And before that I used this light gray, also Pure Lana from Gepard Garn. And before that, as the first contrast color, I used this off-white or beige, so that it's a bit of a fade, but not a very sort of dramatic fade. Yeah. I'm knitting this in a mini knit along with Jackie from the Knitting a Good Yarn podcast and Andrea from the Knit LA podcast, which is a real joy. We had, as I mentioned previously, a little Zoom meeting where we talked about colors and stuff, and we're gonna do another Zoom meeting in a few weeks where we do a little update. How are we on colors? How far have we gotten? Probably Jackie's done by now. She is such a fast knitter. I very much am not. But you know, some of us, we do get sidetracked. So let's see, it's not something that we have to finish really quickly. But let me just show you, if you can tell here. I don't know if you can tell that it begins with the off-white contrast color, then moves into the light gray, and then the rose color begins. The rose color is easier to see. And I've been really in doubt about what colors to use next. And also, what you can't see is that I've used silk mohairs. I'll try to show you all of them by the time I finish it. Silk mohairs as I go along. So I started out using a white silk mohair along with the off-white. Then halfway through the section with the off-white, I changed to a gray silk mohair, and then continued with that when I began with the light gray Pure Lana. Then halfway through that, I changed to a pink, muted pink silk mohair in the same color as the Pure Lana pink. And I'm using those right now. So I try to fade it where I have sort of the Pure Lana's here, the silk mohairs here. Then I change to a different silk mohair here, continue with that, change the other color, so that I tried to make the fade with the silk mohair, and I stress the tried because it's not quite working. The reason why it's not working, even though I did it when I knitted the spot sweater some years ago, is that these are 2 different weights. The Pure Lana is a DK weight, and a pretty thick DK weight, I feel, whereas the silk mohair is of course just lace weight. So they get more or less swallowed up. You may be able to tell a little bit in this gray that the pink silk mohair is there, but there's hardly any, I mean, you hardly see it at all. So, okay, lesson learned. I should have just stuck to the main colors. Or the main yarns. I don't have hardly any effect with the silk mohair. So I hadn't really thought about that, but of course it makes perfect sense. I'm not using any silk mohair for the black because there's no need. The neckband will be added afterwards. And the reason why you don't have a neckband to begin with, that, is that you can also add a turtleneck. And I'm going to opt for the regular neckband. I want it to be a sort of lower neck. You can also opt for relatively balloony sleeves or more dramatic balloony sleeves. I'm probably going to do the more dramatic, and also a more A-line than straight body, which the pattern also has these two options. Let me see, what else can I mention? I'm using a 4.5 millimeter needle, which means I went up one size. The pattern suggests 4 millimeter. That's how I got gauge. That's 4.5, which I use as a US 7. And I'm really enjoying knitting on this. As I mentioned last time, it's a really lovely pattern. And I'm probably not going to be able to wear it until the autumn because it creates quite a thick garment. The Pure Lana is a very thick yarn, very warm. However, I want to say that the yarn, the black color, is ideal for spring knitting because there's more light so you can see better, but it hasn't gotten quite warm yet. So you're not sort of dying with all this yarn, wool in your lap. And I wouldn't probably be able to knit very much on it during the day if it was winter and it's dark, especially because I have dark knitting needles. Oh, maybe I should just also say that it's top down in the round, and you can see here there's some short rows in the back here, so you can perhaps see them to raise the back a little. So that's that. My very much active and enjoyable work in progress. Let me get to the acquisitions now. I'm using 2 yarns, and one of them I bought actually maybe a month and a half ago or something like that, intending it for a different project. And it's this lovely skein of, well, I bought 4 skeins of Surrey alpaca. One thing I've noticed is that a lot of patterns by Danish designers often have a strand of silk mohair. And since I am quite sensitive to silk mohair, especially if it's directly on my skin, and since I'd like to be able to be less fussy when I wear garments and not always have to put a shirt under, or, you know, to be able to wear something even if I don't have a shirt under, basically. And even if I'm relatively warm, I'd like it to be less prickly. And so I went searching for Surrey alpaca. They don't have it in many of my local yarn stores here. They have mostly silk mohair, and I don't know why that is. It's as if the word hasn't gotten round yet that it's a really good alternative to silk mohair. And so I bought this, or these 4 skeins from an independent dyer in Denmark. This is undyed, and the brand is called Sekin, or Danish Sekin, not sure. The label looks like this. And I have to say, I almost don't want to mention it, but I do, because I mean, it's good for her, obviously, the woman who owns this, but I almost don't want to mention how cheap this was. This is 50 grams and 400 meters, and it costs 105 Danish kroner. I don't know exactly how much that is in dollars or euros, but I can put it on the screen. That's really cheap. You can also get it dyed in many different colors, and you can actually, that's of course more expensive because then a dyeing process has to be added on top of it, but you can actually apparently ask for certain colors. So I'm going to definitely want to do that at some point. So I had thought of this for a garment that I'd seen that I'm not going to talk about now because maybe I won't get to it, but where you use just 1 strand of this, and I thought, well, that would be perfect because then I'm going to be able to wear it probably a little more close to or next to skin. But then in the meantime, I saw an Eventsel tease a pattern for this vest called Leander Cardi Vest. My nephew's called Leander, and I just loved it from the first picture that I saw, where she's wearing this off-white, longish cardigan. She's since made it in 2 other sizes, so 3 different lengths and 3 different widths. And I very much want the long, maybe medium width, but the longish version in an off-white. It turned out that hers is actually a little more beige when I looked into the yarn colors that I could see in the pattern mentioned than what I thought. But I want the the cream colored version. So I bought the yarn that the pattern calls for, which is Isaiah Soft in this off-white color, or cream color is the color E0. It's the lightest color in this particular yarn. I think this Isaiah Soft is one of their relatively new yarns, and I hadn't tried it before. It's, let me see, it's 56% alpaca and 44% organic cotton. And this is Surrey alpaca, by the way. It's 65% Surrey alpaca and 35% silk. So this is a pretty luscious, soft blend or combination, I have to say. And I'm really digging the cream color. I think it's because I've been using more satiated colors for a while. So I'm really pleased about this color. I've been wanting to knit something in cream or off-white for a while. I've been using all these colors, which has been lovely, but I've talked about this before. Every time I have I knit something where there's quite a bit of colors, or it's very satiated, or bold colors, I immediately want to knit something more muted. This was more muted, but it's still a color, and I wanted something really clean and maybe also a little more summery. And I feel that even though this is going to be a woolly kind of vest, there's going to be no sleeves. Obviously that's going to make it more summer appropriate, but then also it's going to be open. And then I just really like the cream color for it. It gives me this sort of coastal vibe, which I really like. And I've also been wanting to knit something by an Eventsel again for a while. I just haven't quite landed on a pattern, and this one just ticked all the boxes for me. I knew immediately when I saw it that I wanted to knit it. So let me show you how far I've gotten. I haven't gotten very far. So you cast on for the back here at the top, and then you make increases for the shoulders. So this is the back, and then you knit down, and I've just made a few increases to shape for armholes, just 2 on either side, I think. And I have to break the yarn and pick up stitches now for the 2 fronts on either side here in the shoulders, and then knit down probably to the same length. I haven't read the whole pattern yet, and then join the back and the 2 fronts, and then knit flat, knit back and forth. So it's a stitch pattern that I've knitted before. It's the same one that she used in her Cardi Cocoon, which is really lovely. I really love it. And it's interesting because when I made the Cardi Cocoon a couple of years ago, is that maybe actually 3 years ago, I used a cable needle for all those cables. I can't believe I did that. Now I don't. Especially because it's just a 2, it's just 2 stitches every time. But I really love the fabric in this cream color. Let me just also mention that it's a 17 stitch gauge, and in this relatively thick yarn it goes pretty fast. I believe she recommends a 5mm needle in the pattern, and as I've done every time I've knitted something by her, I do size up, or by most people, I almost always size up. So I'm using a 5.5mm needle, which I guess is a US 9. One thing I want to say about this yarn combination, this is very, very fuzzy. Where I'm using the Surrey alpaca, she is using an Eventsel that is a boucle yarn from Isaiah, but I already had the Surrey alpaca and wanted to use that. So I don't know what it's going to look like if you use the boucle instead, but I like this combination. It's really soft and really sort of fuzzy. However, I have to say, and that's not the Surrey alpaca yarn, I think it's the Isaiah Soft. It's like it's very sticky. It's like I have to work a little extra to work the stitches. And first I thought, oh, this is similar to Snifnook because it's partly alpaca, partly cotton. Yeah, in terms of softness and probably heat as well. But I feel that it's more tricky to knit with. It's like, if you can look here, it's like it's sort of, I don't know if it makes sense, but it's like it sticks to itself. It's like you have to work a little to separate the stitches. So it's a little laborious to knit with, I have to say, even though I'm enjoying it and it's knitting up really fast and it's perfect for this vest. Just a little sort of strange to knit with that Isa soft, I feel. But I do enjoy it and I would recommend it still. I want to show you, I first tried to pair the Surrey alpaca with another yarn. I mentioned in the video I mentioned previously where I talked about my intentions for the year. I talked about using, I have about 6 skeins of this Woollia in a kind of off-white, but it's more gray. And I wanted to use that for a vest, and I'd shown a couple of options that I'm still thinking about, but I found other options, as one does. And I made the first swatch in that color, and you can't see it perhaps so clearly here. It looks lighter on screen than what it really is, but maybe I can compare to this. If you look at this compared to the cream, this is definitely more gray. And I was not digging that, I have to say. I made a swatch with this previously with a gray extra strand of cashmere lace, and it got too muddy. It wasn't really a proper gray. Here I tried using it along with a string of that, or a thread of that off-white Surrey alpaca, and it became again too muddy. So I'm a little on the fence about this. So definitely, even though I felt sorely tempted to use it because I had this yarn in my stash, I didn't want that for the Leander cardi vest. So I'm using the suggested yarn in one of the strands and then another yarn in the other, and I'm really enjoying it. I cannot wait to have that vest and just sort of mosey around in that vest with some kind of loungewear pants and some kind of t-shirt underneath, just for a really casual but kind of luxe look. I want to say a kind of casual, chic loungewear kind of look. I've mentioned that before. I really like that. And I also just want to mention that last time I talked about how I've been watching the Shetland series, the crime series, that I absolutely loved. And some of you talked about it as well in the comments. And I've now finished it. And I began feeling like withdrawal symptoms immediately. I really love that series, and I've been watching a couple of other shows that are okay while I knit, but they're not Shetland. It's just something about the wide open landscapes, the ocean, and the characters and the Scottish accent. I have to say I watched the very last season where Douglas Henshall, who played Jimmy Perez, was no longer the main character, and I did miss him. However, there were some bonuses in that season that some of you alerted me to in the comments in my previous video, which was a little cameo twice by an Invincible sweater, and I thought that was fun. I'll just add in maybe some clips here where I show you, or some photos that I took a screenshot of them. She's wearing I think it's the Rabinia Light, the character in the show, and also the Carla cape. I've been thinking about the Carla cape, so I was like, ooh, that does look good, especially with the Shetland Islands in the background. So, yeah, and it was interesting because they clearly used those sweaters to give the character these Scandi vibes, because the character is already Swedish. So Invincible's designs clearly, apparently, have these, or this sort of Scandinavian vibe of something that's simple, minimalist, casual, but stylish. I really like that. So I'm really loving knitting one of her designs again. And it's nice to be knitting in a solid color while I also still have the Obsidian on my needle. So I can sort of go back and forth with something color work and something solid color, and both of them on not so tiny needles, which is nice. I do appreciate that. So I think that's what I've got today. I hope you're doing well wherever you are, and that you're embracing the season. I'm definitely embracing spring. There goes that hedge cutter again. Probably he's just had a lunch break or something. If you want to share what you're working on, I'd love to know. And I also want to say I haven't really gotten into the whole summer garment thing yet. It's still spring here, and I want to embrace that as much as I can, for as long as I can. And I'm not sure about if I'm gonna get into the summer knitting, but who knows, maybe I will. Since spring has started so early here this year, probably the summer's gonna be also maybe longer and hot, so I probably will get around to it at some point, but I'm always so on the fence about summer garments, whereas I have many winter and autumn garments that I feel tempted to knit up. So let's see. I hope you're doing really well wherever you are, and I send you all my very best wishes for a lovely spring/autumn or summer/winter whenever you see this. And I really appreciate you taking the time to sit with me for a little while. Hopefully you've gotten some knitting done or some chores or something else. And I'll leave you with a few clips from my garden, and hope that you will manage to find a little bit of zen or calm inside, and always remember to breathe. Thank you so much. Sending all my love. Bye.